Okay. Norma, I'm going to need permission.
Okay.
Oh, it's being recorded. Someone else said it.
As people are still arriving in our webinar today, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to the Every Learner Everywhere Expert Network, sponsored, powered by ISTE. In January, Every Learner Everywhere launched the Expert Network to offer professional learning and coaching for higher education faculty and leaders to support their students through and beyond the COVID crisis, including the transition to digital learning. We encourage you to visit the Expert Network website. We're posting the link in the chat for you to get more information and for you to schedule your next coaching session. Welcome to the Every Learner Everywhere Strategies for Success in Online Teaching and Learning Interactive Conference Series. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. My name is Norma Hollebeck, and I'm the manager for network programs and services with Every Learner Everywhere. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to take just a few minutes out to tell you about Every Learner Everywhere and the mission of our network. Every Learner Everywhere is a collaboration of 12 higher education organizations with expertise in evaluating, implementing, scaling, and measuring the efficacy of digital learning and its integration into pedagogical practices. Every Learner Everywhere is one of 3 solution networks sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The other 2 networks focus on advising and developmental education. Here at Every Learner, we work with colleges and universities to build capacity among faculty and instructional support staff to improve student outcomes with digital learning. Our mission is to help institutions use new technology to innovate teaching and learning with the ultimate goal of increasing student success, especially for first-generation college students, poverty-impacted students, and students of color. A few quick housekeeping notes. We are recording today's presentation, which we will share after the webinar. You should be getting an email on Monday with the link to the recording, as well as the slide deck. Throughout the presentation, we welcome your questions in the Q&A section. If a participant raises their hand during the presentation, we will not be able to unmute you. However, we will be monitoring the Q&A as well as monitoring the chat. As a biology professor and a former associate dean, I'm excited about today's discussion, a course redesign project, personalized adaptive learning, and OER content. Our speakers today are Ann Perka, senior instructor, and Kacie Tartt, associate instructor at the University of Central Florida. Ann is a senior instructor with the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures, where she teaches Spanish and TESOL. She is a co-faculty director of the Journey Cuba Study Abroad program and has also directed study abroad programs for UCF in Spain and Nicaragua. She co-founded and currently co-directs the UCF Hillcrest Foreign Language Club. She is a frequent participant in the Faculty Center's Summer Conference and is currently involved in the CDL Pegasus iLab course redesign initiative, working with colleagues in MLL and CDL to incorporate adaptive learning and OER content into first-year Spanish course sequence. Kacie is associate instructor in the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures, where she teaches Spanish. She is co-faculty leader for the Journey Cuba Study Abroad program and faculty leader of Cuba, History, Culture, and Society during Summer A. At UCF, she helped co-found and currently co-directs the UCF Hillcrest Foreign Language Club, in addition to organizing the weekly MLL Game Day. She also works hand in hand with CDL to further distance learning initiatives within the Spanish lower division at the university, most recently exploring adaptive learning methods and technology within her discipline. I will now turn it over to Ann and Kacie.
Hi, everyone. We are so glad you're here. This is something we're super excited about and we love to share and talk about, and we welcome all of your questions. Um, as Norma said, I teach Spanish at UCF and Latin American Studies also at all levels. And so most of our work so far has been focused on these elementary kind of gateway courses and high enrollment courses. So I'll let Anne go ahead if there's anything she would like to add to her bio. As I was listening to them, I thought we are not the same person. We're two people, but we do
There are some
work a lot
there are
together.
some differences, although we like to collaborate on many projects, and we just work really well together. And so anyway, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here, and we are also really excited about personalized adaptive learning. So I'll let Kacie start.
Yeah, Norma, if you could proceed to our next slide for us, that would be great. And that way we can just give everybody a little bit of background about why we made the decision to pursue adaptive learning. And we're going to talk a little bit about obviously our project, and then just kind of some things that we're hoping to do in the future based on what we've learned. One of the main reasons that we first kind of took a step toward adaptive learning was the freedom that we saw that it provided, not only to us, but our students as well. And we probably will repeat ourselves on certain, points, but I think that's a good thing too, because it'll help stick in your mind. So freedom for us, in the sense that, a lot of times we get sort of tied to a publisher in the book and we can't make a lot of changes. And even if we reach out for certain changes, what happens? Okay, we're going to have to wait for another edition to come out and things like that. We were also looking for real world application. Ian and I both obviously work at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. We have a large Hispanic population in Florida, but especially at our university, we're over 25% Latinx students that, identify as Latinx at this point at our school. And, they want to be able to use the language to do things. And so a lot of what they were kind of complaining about where the textbooks were concerned was that it didn't apply to them. It wasn't real. They couldn't use it in their real lives. And so that was something that we wanted to address. Also, language learning is not one size fits all. We had students coming into UCF that had had 2 years in high school, who had had no Spanish at all, who were heritage speakers of Spanish and had spoken Spanish in the home, but had had no formal education, if you will, where the language is concerned. And so those were, that was sort of the impetus, those three things. And we don't have a language placement exam in Spanish at UCF. And so we thought, okay, adaptive learning can help solve some of these problems. Anne, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would just add too, when we talk about real world application, because University of Central Florida is in Orlando, and because Orlando has a very strong tourism sector, as well as the rest of Florida, another real world application we were finding that our students needed and wanted was to be able to communicate with Spanish speaking visitors to our state. And so a textbook a lot of times will have a chapter on travel, but honestly, the vocabulary and the communication skills that are taught from that textbook chapter are not real world applicable for our students' needs. So that's just another example. And the other thing, kind of switching gear to our last bullet here, a lot of people think adaptive learning is really good for STEM courses. It works for math, it works for engineering, it works for biology or physics or that kind of thing. But our university wanted to see, what could we do with adaptive learning outside of the STEM realm? And Kacie's mentioned before that, learning a foreign language, obviously it's not STEM, but languages and mathematics actually do have some similarities. And generally students who are successful in mathematics, for example, are successful in learning languages as well. So we have actually found that adaptive learning can be applicable to non-STEM courses, ours in particular, Spanish courses, and we've had a lot of success with it. So I think we can go to the next slide. Go ahead, Kacie.
So we redesigned at the beginning. We were invited to join, what is known as the Pegasus iLab, run by Dr. Wendy Howard at UCF. This was an initiative that was sponsored by the Board of Trustees at UCF, and it's just what Anne was saying. They were looking to expand the idea of adaptive learning, personalized adaptive learning outside of STEM. I had dabbled, if you will, a little bit at the in-house conference that was referenced in Anne's bio. Our faculty center sponsors an in-house conference every year, and I had seen a presentation regarding Realizeit, which is the personalized adaptive learning platform that we use. And I thought, I wonder if this could work in language. And when they presented it, you know, they presented about STEM courses and other courses. They didn't mention language, but I reached out immediately and they said, well, maybe it could work. And so I started using it as a review in my Spanish 1 course. And because of a book change, decided not to pursue it into the Spanish 2 course. And my students wanted to know where their Realizeit was. They were upset that they didn't have their adaptive learning component. So Dr. Wendy Howard asked if Anne and I would be interested. We said yes, and decided to go ahead and take a semester and tackle our elementary course sequence, which is elementary Spanish language and civilization. We wanted to eliminate the traditional textbook and publisher courseware. I touched on that a little bit at the beginning, but we were just seeing that there was a lot of kind of fatigue where that was associated on the student side, but on our side as well. We used open education resource materials plus self-authored materials that our instructional designer at UCF worked with us to put into Realizeit. And we employed, as I said, this personalized adaptive learning model using Realizeit. We had a semester to do this. Like I said, we did not get started right off the bat because we thought, okay, well, maybe we can just ingest publisher content into Realizeit, which is something that you can do. But the publisher was dragging their feet to the point that we thought, you know, we have a timeline for this redesign and we need to get going. And I said, you know what, let's just go for it. Anne agreed. We have a discipline specific librarian assigned to us. So he was able to look for things for us as well. And we just really got to work. And is there anything?
No, we could go to the next slide.
Okay, great. I'll let you go.
Okay, so just and like Kacie said, we might be repeating a few things here, but that's, you know, just because there's so many details, but we also want to really share with you the impact of this. I think she might have mentioned, you know, students, we have heritage speakers, for example, who grew up maybe speaking Spanish, but they never had formal education. So that's an example of prior subject matter. Students might have taken a year in high school. So they come to the table with some prior knowledge of the subject matter. Some don't have any at all. But what adaptive learning does is it adapts to what students bring to the table, what students know and don't know. And so instead of students having to do all 50 exercises assigned on a certain grammar point, after doing 10 of them, if the system detects that they have mastered this, maybe because of their prior knowledge, in addition to being a good student or understanding the concept, then they can progress on to the next thing. So they don't have to be penalized by doing 40 exercises that they don't really need to do. And they would be penalized if they didn't do them, because then they wouldn't get the points for them. Some of our students have had challenge with online delivery mode. The publisher courseware we were using for online courses and also face-to-face, but it is an online courseware, and we had an ebook. There were just so many technical problems, and students, you know, it was almost like we had to be tech support. And there was always this flurry of confusion at the beginning. And by the time students figured stuff out, or they had the textbook, or their technical problems were solved, we were well into the semester. Now we're able to just hit the ground running on day one. Students don't have to buy anything. They don't have to worry about signing up for a certain courseware platform. So that's been another reason we've wanted to continue to pursue this course redesign, you know, get away from all that. These courses are large courses. They're gateway courses, gen ed courses. For the Spanish sequence, first year, elementary level, we serve over 3,000 students a year. So doing this adaptive learning, in addition to OER content, we've been able to scale up little by little each semester, adding more courses, more instructors. And eventually, you know, the hope is that we can get away from using the textbook, having students have to have all the technical difficulties, and spending all that money. What we have found, we actually have some data that we'll share with you. Since we started teaching with adaptive learning in spring 2019, our student success rates have gone up and our drop fail withdrawal rates have actually gone down. Our students no longer have to spend approximately $245 for the sequence. And the crazy thing here is that sometimes they only have to take the second part of the sequence, but they still have to spend $245. Since the inception of this, our students have saved approximately $374,000. And we also have been recognized by the Florida State University Systems Affordability Counts Initiative. Our courses have been awarded a medallion because this is an initiative that's very important across the state to help increase student access to their education, you know, to bring down those barriers, one of them being economics.
And so I'll say the bullet points on the left side of the screen were things that Anne and I went into the project with that we were really concerned about. And sort of the bullets on the right-hand side of the screen, especially the first three, if you will, were some of the issues that the university as a whole was looking to address. And generally, as far as student success and even the DFW goes, you know, when you implement something new, a lot of times they tell you like, oh, it's going to take 3 iterations. And we were hoping for some level of success, but we were, I mean, kind of had our socks blown off, if you will, that the first time around, you know, just from one semester to the next, we saw such a huge improvement. And we're continuing to collect data and hope to in future semesters. Anne and I both got our fall 21 and spring 22 schedules today. And we have, you know, all courses assigned where we're going to continue to use adaptive learning. And then just the bullet about student evaluations. UCF takes those very seriously, and there's a lot riding on them. And we saw even student satisfaction went up from one semester to the next where these courses were concerned. And just to clarify, we have the textbook cost, but students right now, because of the technology fee that they pay at UCF, they're paying $0 for our course. With the affordability counts, you have to have, it's $20 per credit hour or less to get the medallion that Anne was talking about. But currently our students are paying nothing for the resources they need to take our course. It is
right. And that's because UCF has a contract with Realizeit, but that is, and they do with some other adaptive course learning systems as well. But students already are paying for this, if you will, with their technology fee. So once they get to our course, they don't also have to buy a textbook or a courseware package, you know, that go from a publisher. So.
Okay, Norma, I think we can go on, please.
So we have been continuing with adaptive learning since we started teaching with it in spring. Oh, geez. Yeah, sorry. Spring 19.
Spring 19. Yeah.
Again, Kacie mentioned freedom and creativity. We have a lot of freedom and creativity to deliver the content we want. Students have freedom to go back into the content anytime they want and realize it. They can revise, they can practice, you know, because we have populated it with so many different practice activities as well as the actual course content that they're using to study and to learn from. Probably a lot of you can relate, but especially language teachers. I've been teaching Spanish for many years. We love to create our own materials. And so sometimes I think, you know, why are we spending all this money on these textbooks? Even when we use them, we were always creating our own materials to help get these points across, to make it fun, make it interesting. So this using adaptive learning just allows us to have this kind of creativity even more, because we've used our own materials as well as OER content that we found from other sources. Let's see. Kacie mentioned our students demanded it after she used it as an add-on to her course. We believe it is very student-centered because it does meet students where they are and it recognizes what they bring to the table. And I think that right there could kind of be an analogy for student-centered instead of us delivering something that you have to do no matter what. If they know something already and they've mastered it, they can kind of go on to the next thing and really focus on what they need to know and continue to acquire the skills at their own pace. Although it's not a self-paced course by any means, because we have different modules and each module is open for 3 weeks, but within those 3 weeks, they have the freedom to kind of go around and do what they want and move ahead. Kacie, if you want to pick up with innovative and cutting edge, or
yeah, and so as far as that is concerned, I mean, we do teach a lot of the same courses, and we have been. I mean, I've been at UCF now for 15 years, and even though I teach, you know, elementary, intermediate, and advanced Spanish, a lot in a, you know, in a particular semester, I may have 2 or even 3 of the 4 classes I teach be the same, you know, the same section or the same course, sorry. And so I'm always looking for new ways that I can help, you know, my students. And the thing is too, the student that I have in my classroom now is not the student that I had in my classroom 15 years ago, is not the student that was in my classroom, you know, when I was a GTA teaching Spanish. And so this is really helping. And, you know, I kind of said before, there are things that Anne and I have sort of discovered along the way. And a lot of that has been thanks to ELE and APLU, you know, where now we are able to focus on where we were focused on course content before, we can kind of now focus on, you know, our students and the faces that we're seeing in our classroom virtually, if you will. Because another thing about UCF that we like to mention is that 50%, approximately 50% of our student body are minorities. And so it's really given us kind of extra tools and ways that we can help, you know, these minority students, first generation students. And we have been able to focus more on our teaching and learning. We don't have to be tech support anymore. We rarely have any questions regarding the technology. And so we can get back to teaching and looking at the analytics in a way that helps us help our students. It's not just us answering a barrage of emails every time an assignment is due because they can't connect or they can't do this or they can't do that. You know, we've been able to use this technology to our advantage, and because it does work so well, we're teachers again.
Right. And I'd like to just add to that, UCF is a Hispanic serving institution, and I think it's around 30%, correct me if I'm wrong, Kacie, of our student body is of Hispanic background. And so a lot of them are, you know, what we call heritage speaker students. So they might be in elementary Spanish, even though, you know, you can't assume that a person of Hispanic origin, you know, speaks Spanish, of course. But a lot of them may have heard it as they were growing up, and so they can speak it, but they never learned how to read it or write it, you know, formally. And so we've found that the Realizeit has helped us identify those students, because what'll happen is they're able to indicate to us how they're feeling with emojis, by the way, which are kind of fun. And then Kacie discovered the first time around, she kept seeing all these frustrated face emojis, and she realized in communicating with these students, so why are you frustrated? These were heritage learner students who knew some Spanish, but they didn't know how to spell the words properly, for example. So Kacie was able to identify that group, look at the analytics, and then help these students with their spelling. The non-heritage speaking students didn't necessarily have the issues with spelling because they had not heard Spanish their whole life and were learning it more from a blank slate. So that's another thing that this has allowed us to do at UCF. And
they may have had, you know, the non-heritage speakers may have had another issue altogether that was a result of English interference. So there's we can kind of have all these little cohorts now within our course. And just the repeating dividends with the level of effort. So from the outset, you know, people always say, well, it must have been a lot of work. It was a lot yes, it was a lot of work. It was. We worked super hard. We planned, you know, that semester. There were days where we decided, okay, we're going to get together today and we're going to work 9 to 5, and this is what we're going to do. But we got it done. And now what we're seeing is that as we are going through and making improvements every semester, I mean, we've now done a second course redesign. We had a subject matter expert go through, you know, and check. We added images, we added infographics, more videos, things like that. And so we have, you know, plans to continue to do that. But in my opinion, I wouldn't say that it's less work now that I'm doing in my courses from before, but it's more meaningful work. It's teaching again. It's focus on my students.
It's being creative.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the next few slides we have some data, results of student success and drop, fail, withdraw. So there's 4 of them. If you could go to the next one, we'll just say a couple quick things about
Before we go to the next one, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So one of our audience members was asking, you'd mentioned that this goes beyond the STEM, but do you all have in your circle of adaptive learning faculty and developers, do you have some chemistry professors or other science professors that are also embracing this mode of learning?
Yeah, we've actually worked with well, we've presented with at various conferences, and we've been part of a cohort of adaptive learning people at UCF with a colleague who teaches physics, a colleague who teaches biology. I don't recall chemistry. Kacie?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That would be a question, that we could definitely ask. But I see it going so well in the sciences at UCF that I almost would put money down right here that someone's doing something in chemistry, even if it's just like one module or something like that. I mean, we have colleagues in anthropology, psychology. I mean, this is now university wide. And like I said, and I think it's important to say too, yes, Anne and I completely redesigned 2 entire courses. But a lot of people don't even do that. I mean, I can think specifically of an anthropology professor who just redid one module that he saw students really struggled with. And now he's seeing, they're not having the same issues that they were having. So you can kind of tailor it to what, you want to do and what you want to do in your course. You don't have to go whole hog.
Yeah, or for example, you could use adaptive learning for practice, but also use textbook publisher materials. So there's just many different ways you can do it. We went whole hog and total OER, get rid of publisher materials, use adaptive learning, but you don't have to do, there's so many different things you can do.
Yeah, I see another question as well about how, we would recommend that a central IT organization start on something like this. We are very fortunate at UCF to have the Center for Distributed. Oh, Patty, you want to go then? She wants to answer it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just hit that because you were answering it currently.
Okay, got it. This is new for me, this type of question, Q&A. I like it. So I think it's kind of looking at your university and kind of seeing where your support maybe for even online and distance learning would be, and maybe how, the instructional design team is set up, if you will, if that's even something that you have at your school, because our instructional designers, they're invaluable in this process. And have been, and I'm sure will continue.
Yeah. I also think that a good way to start on something like this is to ask questions. Ask people like Kacie and me, or like Dr. Wendy Howard, who directs our Pegasus iLab, if a meeting can be set up where you could pick people's brains and find out, what did you do? What do you recommend? Definitely, talk to people and find someone who's done this kind of thing, or what interests you, and just see if you can meet with them. We actually just did that last week. We met with some professors at a university in Monterrey, Mexico. And they found out about us and what we're doing with Realizeit and adaptive learning using Realizeit. And they asked us if we could meet with them by Zoom, and we met with them for an hour. They were actually all tech people. They were not professors. And we explained to them about our project and what we did, and et cetera. So they just set it up and said, would you mind if we asked you all some questions? And we met and gave them a bunch of information. So that's a good way to get started too. Okay, so project data, we have 4 slides. I know that all of you are going to have access to this slide deck, so I don't want to spend tons of time on it. But they compare student success and non-success before using adaptive learning and then while using adaptive learning. So grades of ABC increased, non-success, which is, a D or F, decreased. We also have on these slides drop, fail, withdraw. So if you want to just go to the next slide, this is overall.
The first
ahead,
semester.
Kacie.
Yeah, the semesters that we were not using. So when you see spring 18, fall 18, those were the semesters that Anne and I taught with the traditional courseware and did not use personalized adaptive learning. And then fall 19 was when we
We started.
got started with those. And so what you're able, to see the difference there, the percentages that student success increase for some semester to semester.
Can you go to the next slide? Okay, and you know what? I realized there's a mistake. That's why I got confused. The first slide is for Spanish 1, I believe, and this slide is for Spanish 2. I think what happened was I accidentally removed the name of the course, but I will fix that and get that to you. So I apologize for that because I'm looking at this. So this is, I believe the first one was for Spanish 1, and this is for Spanish 2.
Yes.
So if you could go to the next one. And again, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here, but the student, so basically what the slides are, my courses for Spanish 1, my courses for Spanish 2, Kacie's courses for Spanish 1, which I believe this one is. And then if you could go to the next one, Kacie's courses for Spanish 2. But what I'll do is I will update this and I'll send it to Norma, and that way they can post the one that indicates which course it is. But either way, you can see that the student success and also the non-success and the withdrawal, the success numbers have gone up for all 4, and non-success and withdrawal have actually gone down.
Yeah.
So I think we can move on. And so along the way, Kacie, if you want to just talk real quick, starting in fall 2017.
Yeah, that was when I just, used it the first time as a review, and it was around 100 students. And like I said, there was an imminent textbook change, and I thought, I'm not going through all this work and having my IDs, my instructional designers, go through all this work for just a semester. But the students were really up in arms that I didn't have it. They were like, where is our review? Because they saw the benefit of just having it as an optional review going into some of their more higher stakes assessments. And then from spring 2019 to spring 2020, we had 5 to 8 courses within the department that we were using adaptive learning with, and you can see the number of students there affected. Fall 2020, we're up to 12 course sections, 420 students, and then spring 2021, right now we have 14 course sections. So each time, Ann and I started out with just the 2 of us, and then you can see we had in fall 2020, it was the first semester that we had some colleagues join us who were interested. And in spring 2021, we had another colleague who asked to teach a section. And so he's now teaching that as well. Additional languages and development at UCF using adaptive learning are Portuguese, Italian, French, and German. And then in fall of 2020, I was the first semester where an upper level Spanish course used adaptive learning, and I taught that, and I had we don't have the data on these slides, but I just had them look at the data, and my student success rate increased by 7%. So I thought that was amazing. And the only thing that changed was that I was using adaptive learning and it was fully online. So I was a little worried because I'd never taught this course as a fully online course before. So to think that not teaching it face-to-face, going to fully online and implementing adaptive learning, my students were that much more successful. So, that's sometimes people think that may be one of the drawbacks, of using adaptive learning, is like maybe the teacher is more hands-off in a way, but I just don't think that is the case at all. I think I have so many more tools at my disposal to help my students at this point. And, that was it's hard to argue with numbers. And I think that has been kind of proven in the data as we move on. And, hopefully at some point this can be implemented program-wide, at least in lower level, in the lower level Spanish courses. We are about to submit this month for a 3rd round of the course redesign initiative at UCF. We're hoping to get the grant. And with that grant, not only are we going to continue to modify the elementary Spanish courses, we're hoping to do the intermediate course sequence, continue working in the upper level Spanish course that I mentioned, which is an advanced Spanish grammar and composition course, and then with another upper level course that is an advanced directed readings in Spanish. So
I think we have one more slide, and then I see some questions coming in.
Yeah.
So We've learned a lot over this. And I think some of the questions coming in kind of have to do with, you know, how much work is involved? Where do you start? Some ideas to consider. How long does it take? Is it a lot of work? Yeah, so I can answer that question. Hindsight 2020, I mean, I think one of the best things that we did was that we worked together. I do not recommend working alone because it's really great to have the support of a colleague or two or three and to share the work and to bounce ideas off of each other. And then I just think in the end, you have a much stronger project. But I do see that one of the questions coming in is how much time it takes. How much time does it take to redesign a course for adaptive learning? Is it time consuming? I think it depends on how you decide to use adaptive learning. For us, it was very time consuming because we decided to use it for the entire course, 2 courses, the entire course. We decided to use only open education resources. That's the course content or the textbook, if you will, that is delivered in Realizeit. And then all the practice activities are delivered in Realizeit. But one of the other questions that just came in is how have you dealt with the passive learning that adaptive learning creates? We do use Realizeit when it comes to the practice for machine graded practice. However, we use Canvas at UCF for our online course management system, learning management system. So the students have a lot of other work that they do in Canvas that is open-ended, it's creative, it's presentational. So I don't view the adaptive learning as passive because they're engaging with the content through Realizeit, then they're applying it to practice activities of all types. Okay, it can be fill the blank, multiple choice, you know, sequencing, things like that. But then also, then they have assignments that they have to do and assessments that they have to do that are delivered through Canvas, where they have to write, they have to do a presentation, they have to get together in a group and communicate and then record that conversation. They have to create an infographic illustrating a certain point. So I hope that kind of answers those 2 questions. But back to how much time, it just depends on what you decide to do. For us, it took a lot of time. It took pretty much an entire semester, meeting once a week, and then on our own. And the once a week meeting times, I'd say each of us spent about 10 hours a week, give or take. But again, if you decide to just use it, say, for homework or for a couple modules, it could be less time. So it just really depends.
Yeah, and to address the passive comment question a little bit too, I think because these are open to our students all semester, what I'm seeing is that even though we set a due date, and we kind of say, okay, you want to make sure that you're done with this module by this time so that you can address those higher stakes assessments that Anne is talking about in Canvas, what we're finding is that students are going back in and they're revising their scores or they're practicing. And so I have found that they're even more engaged, you know, than they were before, especially with, you know, especially a lot more than they were with the software we were using with the textbook, because I feel like with that, you know, it was sort of a one and done. I mean, they weren't able to go back in, they weren't able to revise, they didn't have multiple chances. And this, and I'm making up a word that, you know, a colleague in biology sort of made this word up where Realizeit is concerned. This is highly variabilized, if you will. And so we have so many questions within Realizeit that if a student works up to mastery and they get their green star or they're proven competent, if they go back, there's so many questions in there of so many different types that they're being given, you know, more and more content that they haven't seen before. And so, you know, that's another thing that I find really amazing about this technology is what we can do. And if something isn't right, or we want to add another answer option, or, you know, I have a student from Peru who says, but in Peru, when we're doing greetings, we say this, you know, we can add that in. And so it really represents, again, you know, the students who are taking it, it makes it more real, if you will, to them. They feel like they have a stake in it. It gives them agency, you know, if they can query a question and then we can say, you know what, yeah, that is a way you can say that. And we can go right in real time and add, you know, another answer option, if you will. And that's just one example. So anyway.
Could you elaborate a little bit, you know, when going back to the question on the time and workload efforts, when you're working with the integrating the adaptive learning, the courseware, how do you deal with kind of the nuts and bolts of the syllabus and the assignment guidelines and evaluation criteria so that the students don't get completely lost in the details of how this is going to impact them and how they're going to use it?
That's a great question, but when we create the syllabus, there are different categories. So there's the personalized adaptive learning category, which is where they get the content and realize it. It's sort of the textbook, if you will, audio, video, text, all kinds of stuff. Then they do the practice activities, which is homework activities. That's worth X amount of their grade. Then they have writing activities that they do in Canvas. That's X amount of their grade. They have quizzes. They have a final assessment delivered in Canvas. They have a final digital storytelling project video that they create, and they use the writing activity they've done in chunks all semester to narrate it. In Canvas, they do that, and they post it in Canvas. They have discussions and conversations in Canvas. So, you know, we set up the syllabus so that, you know, there's a table with all these different categories, and each category comprises a certain percentage of the final grade. One of those categories is personalized adaptive learning / homework activities. So it's pretty clear to them that, you know, they're going into the course through Canvas, but then in each module, all of these different things that they do in each module are listed. And in each module or lesson or unit or chapter, whatever you want to call it, one of those items is personalized adaptive learning and the homework activities. Do they click on a link that takes them out to Realizeit, but it's integrated within Canvas. So, you know, when we use the courseware from the publisher, we had the same kind of category, but it was do the activities in the MyLab or do the activities in the SuperSite, you know, for the publisher that we were using. So they don't get confused because it's organized in such a way that everything is laid out very clearly on the syllabus and within Canvas. Does that answer the question?
I think it did, yeah.
Okay.
We've got a couple others. One of them is it cost effective to do this only for some courses or some activities? How expensive was it for your institution?
So because every student that comes into, so here's, I'm like more, I feel like I don't feel like I was ever so data driven before, but now here I am. So of all the students that come into UCF, complete a 4-year degree at UCF, 83% of them take at least one online course. Mm-hmm. And so the tech fee that they pay when they become a student, you know, that goes toward paying for these sorts of platforms, if you will. And so whether an instructor chose to use it or not, the reality is that, you know, it's already been paid for in a sense, because, you know, that's money that is set aside for these contracts, to have contracts with these companies. But any and all instructor or professor, if you will, at UCF could use this if they wanted to. And as Ann said before, could use it for one lesson in one module, or could use it for the whole course as we have.
Our next question, have you assigned a group project using adaptive learning?
We have not. So initially we had, the very first semester, we had some more open-ended projects in Realizeit, if you will. But what we were finding was that students were having to upload into the system, and then we were having to download those. And Ann and I have anywhere from 100 to around 120 students a semester, which, you know, some people in different disciplines would say that's nothing. But, you know, in the languages it is, because we do have so many open-ended activities. And so it was just sort of overwhelming our system to have to upload and download, and the students couldn't tell if their upload had been accepted. And so then we had students that were uploading the same thing 10 times, and we were having to try to skip and ignore those. So we made the decision to pull anything that was instructor graded out and put it in Canvas, because it was much easier to grade and we weren't having to download everything. we did go back to Realizeit and say, you know, this is something that we want for the future, because our goal would be to have every single thing in Realizeit, even the group projects and synchronous chat and synchronous conversation assignments that they have. And so that is something, you know, that is in the works now, and we've been told is up and coming. So that's another thing about Realizeit, just from my perspective, is that they are so open for suggestions. And I mean, we're constantly being asked, like, what could be better? What can we do to make this better for you and your experience, not only in the experience of the students as well. So hopefully that kind of went off, but no is the answer. And then all that extra was for free.
I'm curious because I have tried adaptive courseware from a couple of different publishers. And I agree when you said, you know, there are times and places where you become more of an IT person. You feel like you're dealing more with the troubleshooting. So can you just give us a little more insight in terms of how painful was that? Or did you get discouraged and just kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, my students aren't learning because we're too busy working with the technology rather than the technology working with us, and kind of how you got through that?
Yeah, I can respond to that, and then I'm sure Kacie can too. I'll try and be quick. So when we were using publisher courseware, the students had an e-text, and then they had the courseware where they did all their activities, etc. They could also buy a paper copy of the book if they wanted. But because our coordinator of all of these courses, and we serve over 3,000 students a year in these 2 courses, had our coordinator had to communicate and collaborate with the publisher rep to make sure that, let's say in the fall semester, there were 35 sections of these courses. So our coordinator had to make sure that the 35 sections were created in the publisher's courseware system. She had to make sure that the names of every single instructor went with their section, and then that specific section information, which had a separate number for each single section of the 35, for example, had to be given to the instructor, and then that information also had to be given to that instructor's students. So right there, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so confusing. So then the students try and sign on, they try and get in the system. However, the students who need financial aid to buy the courseware and the e-text, unfortunately, their financial aid a lot of times doesn't get dispersed until week 2, 3, or 4 of the semester. So here they are, and they don't have access to the publisher courseware system, which has the e-text and all the practice and homework activities. The only thing they can access is what's delivered in Canvas. So, and then when they finally did get into the system, there could be a lot of confusion because they might have misread the section number that they were in, and they might have registered like in Kacie's class when they were my student. And then we had to go and try and get that student out of her section and into my section. So that's just a start. Now with Realizeit, our students don't pay for it. Even if they had to, it would probably be about $35 is what we've been told. But if the tech fee situation changes, but because there's no assigning 35 students for Professor Tartt to this section in Realizeit, and that's their section, we don't have all those tech problems. We just give them the link to Realizeit in each of the different modules throughout the course, and they just click on it and there they go. Because if they're in the course, if they're registered in the course in Canvas through UCF, since Realizeit is, the link to Realizeit is delivered within that course, as long as they're registered in that course, they have access to Realizeit. So I hope that kind of answers the question. No longer are we fielding all these panicky phone calls and questions and trying to figure out all these technical problems. And they also don't have to wait till they get money to buy the courseware system package with the textbook to start their work. They can start on day 1.
Yeah, that question came from me because I was popping gray hairs every semester because it was, you know, those first 3 or 4 weeks were always so challenging. I wasn't getting to teach, like you said, you're not getting to do the teaching. Your effort is in, why did the, you know, adaptive courseware do this for this person, but not for that, or why was the answer wrong?
And then you're spending your energy trying to get students caught up, and it's not their fault. And so,
well, and when we have so many students at UCF who are Pell recipients who depend on their financial aid, and they're not able to get a book for a month into the course, it's like you're already putting another obstacle in front of them. And, you know, I don't even pretend to understand the mysteries of financial aid, but it doesn't make sense to me that these kids start a course on January 11th and on February 11th, they're like, okay, I finally have my book. You know what I mean? We don't have to deal with that anymore. And so I just wanted to like verbally address a question that I typed an answer to that now I'm trying to remember what it was. Yes. So the question was, could students like potentially skip, or do they have to take the first part of the class, or this, you know, knowledge that they already have? So we have preset determined knowledge questions at the beginning of every you know, concept, if you will, or vocabulary node or whatever within Realizeit. And if a student answers that set of questions and they show mastery, they're able to move right on in the learning path. They don't have to do all of the questions associated with that. And so that way they are able to work through more at their own pace, if you will. And another like future goal or dream, if you will, of mine would be to have students be, we do have an intensive course where they do these two courses in one semester. Mm-hmm. However, I think it would be great if a student, you know, started in the second course, let's say 1121 elementary, and we're able to finish, let's say in 6 or 7 weeks, and then move right on into the intermediate courses. And I think that would help with some of the issues that we have of students who are trying to minor and even major in Spanish, where, you know, they're not able to get maybe a course they need and it's delaying graduation, and what do they not want to have to tack on another semester, and then, you know, so I see like that again, I always add on extra a little sugar on top, but yeah, so with the determined knowledge questions, they're able to move right on.
That said, though, they can always go back and keep and go back to those concepts that maybe they showed mastery in from the get-go and practice. They can review them, they can practice more activity.
Yeah. It never shuts
they're
them
never
out.
They're never closed off from going back to additional practice if they want it.
Mm-hmm.
So to build on that, there is a question from our audience saying, I wonder about the learning objectives in relation to adaptive learning in terms of students' pre-knowledge and skills. For example, if your course aims to help students to learn basic grammar structures, should students with the language skills not take the class in the beginning? So is that what y'all were building on just now in terms of
yeah, that was
past?
the one that I was addressing, because I typed a quick answer, but then I just wanted to say, you know, so in case someone missed it, like, so all the participants could hear.
So this has been wonderful for me because, like I said, I struggled with trying to adopt adaptive courseware in classes several times. I targeted it, you know, each time tried a different approach, hoping that I would get through that IT part of it. Yeah. And the frustration that the students get if the adaptive courseware, it's not, you know, technically if it has the glitches. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you're right, after the second, you know, usually after your second or third semester using it, you've got all the kinks worked out. Then you just have to hope they don't do an update.
Well, and between all of us, sometimes I think things can be advertised as adaptive and they aren't truly adaptive. Just to, you know, put that out there.
That it's not really AI driven. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing any more questions. Are there any? Oh, wait a second.
Until right now.
I see one popped up there. I always include enhancing writing skills across my courses. Should I consider make this learning outcome selective? I'm a communication professor and writing and oral skills are the core skills of all of our courses. But I also know some students hate writing. What would be an area that are not negotiable for adaptive learning?
Okay, I'm just reading through quickly again.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question that says, should I consider making this learning outcome selective?
I don't think so, because I think just as a language teacher, that writing skills are and have suffered a lot. And so, you know, even when they're coming into my course, like I find that they struggle with some concepts in Spanish because maybe it's not super strong in English. So if we were enhancing and reinforcing those in other courses, that would make me, you know, super happy. So maybe not that one, but, you know, and if I'm understanding the question correctly, I kind of jumped right in. I think I think maybe there are some things that could be selective. For example, and I don't like to say this, but a lot of times what people kind of push to the wayside in Spanish would be like culture and cultural competencies. And they focus more on, you know, the grammar, if you will. But I find that because of this, we're having even more time to address culture, and the students are really able to get in there and use the language. So,
but also our adaptive learning, our content and Realizeit is infused with culture,
Yes.
but it's more real world culture, if you will, than the canned culture from the textbook that really didn't connect with our students' real world and that real world application for which they need Spanish language skills.
So I guess the answer to that is that Ann and I don't feel like we're having to negotiate anymore what to include or what to leave out, because again, like, I repeat the word freedom over and over again. And to the poor people who've heard me speak before, you know, on this topic, or who I've had separate conversations with, you know, they're like, oh my gosh, Casey's such a broken record. But, you know, we don't have to negotiate so many things anymore, which is great.
Yeah.
So
any last comments that you all want to toss out there? Good, little last tidbit of advice.
Partner up. So much easier when you have somebody to work with. And
That was quick.
We're just so thankful that I've had the opportunity. So
with that in mind, I would like to thank Ann and Kacie for such a wonderful presentation. The passion that you all have for this adaptive learning, it's re-inspiring me, so that the next time I'm in the classroom, I don't think I'm going to think twice about it like I have in the past, and jump in wholeheartedly. I do ask that our audience take a few minutes to complete our survey for today's presentation using the link that we're putting into the chat. If you've got something going on immediately after, don't worry, we'll send you the link to the survey when we send you the recording and the slide deck links. As a quick reminder, we do encourage you to visit the Every Learner Everywhere website, our resources page, and the Expert Network page. Thank you again to our speakers. I would like to thank our audience for attending today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you next week for our live Q&A panel, Active and Adaptive Learning. And we hope you have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much.
Bye.